training, session 1. Rob Johnson is our instructor today. He is a architect administrator for the Board of Building Standards, primarily responsible for building department oversight and investigations, and highly knowledgeable in this area that he's about to present to you. Rob, it's all you. Rob, you're muted. Rob, you're muted. Rob, we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone.
There we go. All right.
I got a new screen in play right now, and things got hidden. Anyway, good morning. I'm glad everyone could meet up today. Meg already introduced me. I just wanted to elaborate today on what we discussed in brief yesterday during the Chapter 1 training. That training was basically a flyover, if you will, of everything that was in Chapter 1. Today, in this breakout session, we're going to focus on the inspector's skills and their duties and responsibilities. So there's going to be a number of things we're going to go through. Every single piece in section 108 will be covered today, and I'm going to elaborate how those things are executed as we're doing building code administration and enforcement. So really our purpose today is to establish that required inspections are designed to verify that the installation of materials and assemblies and systems are done in conformance with the approved construction documents. This is obvious. We've talked about this constantly yesterday. My hope, though, is that for those of you who are new to the board and to building department enforcement, my hope is that what you're learning in this Code Academy is going to assist you in adopting the board's practice of the performance of your required duties and responsibilities. So, as a quick introduction, we talked about this yesterday, but it is worth repeating. What we want to do is understand building code enforcement concepts and what it is. The intent or the purpose of the code, as established in OBC Chapter 1, is to establish uniform minimum requirements related to the conservation of energy and safety and sanitation of buildings for their intended use and occupancy, with consideration for performance, meaning establishing requirements in terms of performance objectives of things that are designed into buildings, to the extent of use, meaning the use of materials, technical methods, devices, etc. And the building code really does strive to recognize that cost does have an effect on safety at times. So the International Code Council and all the development that they do of the codes has really got that always in mind. Of course, the main objective is to ensure safety of occupants in buildings. No matter how big, how complex that they may be, they need to be safe for an occupant to be able to exit buildings, to be able to be safe in buildings, to be able to operate in buildings safely. And of course, the other intent is standardization. That is to recognize that there is standards with regards to construction practices and methods, equipment and material techniques and installations. And this will also include industrialized units, which are factory built buildings that end up on job sites and become part of a new building in conjunction with things that are approved at the local level in the building department. So we'll get into those things in down the road here. I will say, just as a point of order, at 10 o'clock we'll take like a 5 or 10 minute break. So if you need to get away from the presentation for a minute, take care of yourself, we will do that at 10 o'clock. Okay, so as I said, safety is our top concern. A good example of this is fairly simple because we all deal with it. Your home is a place designed to control outside influences. It is to be designed so that the occupants are safe as they use it, but it is primarily designed to protect you and your family. The greatest vulnerability is the activity of sleep. When we sleep, it's quiet, we're comfortable, we're protected from the elements outside, and perhaps even criminal activity. The codes are designed, though, to mitigate these active risks of fire and inclement weather. So even though sleep creates a risk factor, we want to make sure that the buildings that we're in, especially our homes, are designed in such a way as to mitigate the greatest risk, and that is fire. If we do not have things built into our residential structures that we could suffer as a result of something that didn't go right with the system in the house or an electrical fire or things like that. So as you can see, safety is always our top concern. Whenever we go from the outside to the inside of the structure, risks increase. So let's move on from that and let's talk about some of the strategic objectives of the board and the things that we promote. Of course, building codes mitigate risks and hazards of all types, and even for people and how they gather in buildings. We promote consistent and uniform code enforcement in the state of Ohio, and that's really one of my primary objectives in my position with the board, is to establish uniformity and consistency of building code enforcement through the state. So that if I go to get an approval from, let's say, East Cleveland, and then I go to Cincinnati, and I go to Central Ohio, Columbus, I should be experiencing a consistently similar process to attain building code compliance with the design that I've submitted. Of course, everyone's different, personalities are different, structures and buildings that these building departments reside in, their capacity to handle various levels of projects, all those things factor into how constituents experience how building code enforcement is done. Our hope is that through this training and the chapter 1 training you had yesterday, that consistency will occur throughout the state in such a way that everyone will have a basic understanding that this is how it's done in Ohio, not this is how it's done in your community or in that community or that community. Okay, a couple definitions with regards to inspections. These were talked about yesterday, but I just want to reiterate so that we're all on the same page. Access or right of entry. It's permission from an owner to enter a site or building. Adjudication order is a notice of violation providing the legal process of dispute resolution, meaning that between the owner and the building official. An approval is a certification of a building design that is code compliant. And the Higher Revised Code, of course, calls it a license to build. Some other definitions. Compliance. It's a design and constructions that comply with the Higher Revised Code sections that regulate or give the board authority to regulate the building codes. An inspection is a verification that construction matches the approved construction documents. Violation is a notification that the construction does not match the standard of the approved construction documents. So as you can see, this language is designed to ensure clarity when we're doing enforcement. Okay, so again, this is reiterated from yesterday, but the scoping of the building code is such that structures are to be determined to comply with the building code. In other words, to become safe. So no plan shall be approved or inspection approval given unless the building represented by those plans would, if constructed according to those plans, shall comply with the Ohio Revised Code and the rules of the board, which is the actual building code. An owner may exceed the requirements of the Ohio Building Code. So what that means is that if, let's say you want to build a house and you want to take the extra step to really provide a higher degree of protection for you and your family. So you ask the builder to put in a fire protection system, sprinkler system. There's no problem doing that. You're actually exceeding the requirements of the Residential Code of Ohio by incorporating that system into the design. However, it still has to be submitted with the design. It still has to be determined to be in compliance with the code, and it has to be installed in compliance with the approved construction documents. Even though it's not required as a system in this type of building, it is still required to be approved and inspected, and that is part of the certificate of occupancy. Submittal documents are more than just drawings. Construction documents sometimes will have to have in it part of that package a statement of special inspections when it's required in accordance with the scope of the project. So when construction documents have been found to be in compliance, the building official shall issue a certificate of plan approval so that the construction can begin. One point about the special inspections is that it is instituted due to the importance of the systems, assemblies, and materials being used. So when you look in Chapter 17, you see the types of things that are required as a special inspection. Then you begin to understand that that's more than just scoping of the project. It's about the importance level of the types of things that are being inspected in Chapter 17. Alternative engineer design. Just a heads up, in the near future, we're going to issue a memo, a BBS memo, an alternative engineer design. It appears to be something that is not clearly understood out in the general public. And we just wanted to clarify what it actually is, what it covers, how it's used, how it's enforced, how it's determined to comply. So when we look at 106.5, it's called alternative engineer design. So the design documentation, including the inspection and testing of an approved alternative engineer design, shall comply with the requirements in 106. So design criteria, meaning it's design that shall conform to the intent of the building code and shall provide an equivalent level of quality, strength, effectiveness, fire resistance, durability, and safety. Materials, equipment, or components shall be designed and installed in accordance with the manufacturer's installation instructions. So just so we all understand, when products are put into buildings, that includes materials, and it also affects methods of construction. that majority of these things have already been vetted. They've already been tested. They've already been approved. They have reports associated with them from conformity assessment bodies. And a designer wants to incorporate maybe those things plus use it in a little different way, or create some other part or a new facet of this product in order to do something different in terms of how the building is designed. The key is that we don't want to restrict that ability of a designer to do that, because they're creative, they're innovative. Sometimes they create new things that eventually become a product that now gets bought and used after it's been tested and vetted and all that. So really the criteria here is that the scoping of an alternative engineer design is fairly narrow in the sense that it has a connection with chapter or section 114 in the Ohio Building Code, with regards to how products, materials, and methods are established. When a designer does his own engineered version of something, then we need calculations. We need perhaps testing and equivalency requirements. And the engineer has to basically prove to the building official that this new thing is meeting the intent of the building code, and they've been able to do to the best of their ability, and perhaps even with help from testing laboratories and things like that, to establish that what they've designed is approvable and can be integrated into a building. So a good example of this is actually a very old example. Between 1936 and 1943, the great Frank Lloyd Wright, perhaps considered America's architect, had performed an alternative engineer design on a building that was amazing. And it's still there and it's still amazing. What he did was created an alternative engineer design. And this design uniquely is addressing structural systems. He had a couple of engineers that always thought outside of the box, and that's why Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings are extraordinary. But I think the main thing here we want to consider is how they went about doing it. They had a design, as you can see, the blueprint there to the left. This is actually basically a truncated view of this very slender column that had a mushroom top, basically an integrated roof, a portion of the roof. And he was going to put these lily pads throughout this enormous space, which was basically an open concept plan for offices. So you can see he was very much ahead of his time. And when you look at the middle picture, you kind of get the sense of what the scope and the size of these things are. At the base of that column, it's only 9 inches wide. And it continues to get like a tendril, continues to get wider as it goes up, and then blossoms in the top as this big concrete, reinforced concrete pad. So in order for him to get this approved by the building department back then, he had to prove that it worked. Okay? The design most likely worked in accordance with what the building department evaluated, but they needed proof that this thing was actually going to work, because what is in between the columns is all glass. The whole roof is a luminous tube glass structure. And that's what makes this thing so amazing. So not only did it have to support itself, but it had to support all the weight of the glass roofs that were connected to these mushroom columns. So the deal was this: they had to test it, they had to prove it. As you can see in the far right, and actually you can see Frank Lloyd Wright and the building official in the hats there in the bottom right. So workers piled basically sandbags on top of the roof. So that piece up there that is just sandbags was the requirement to get it to comply or pass. And that was based on all the climatic loading, such as snow loads that occur up in Racine, Wisconsin, and a host of other possibilities with wind. And so it passed when they got to the sandbags. Then they brought a crane in because Frank Lloyd Wright, just he was a proud man. He decided to fill the entire thing up at the top with more, including rock and sand and dirt, and basically exceeded it 5 times higher than what the dead loads and live loads would be in order to be approved. So I think that was probably wise on his part because who knows after you connected everything together how it actually worked. But this is a great example of an alternative engineer design. So when someone is a designer is submitting an alternative engineer design, you should have the expectation of seeing information that has proven that it performs in accordance with the code. Okay, so enforcement of the administration rules. Like I said, construction documents are more than just drawings. They include specifications and project manuals. They will include manufacturer's installation instructions, perhaps reports with other data, alternative engineer design and calculations and technical design analysis that was supporting that, and manufacturer's data, MSDS sheets, and the list goes on. These are all things as you as an inspector would be using to access information so that when you walk a site to do a required inspection, that you need to make sure that you have verified that what is built matches what's in this design package. Okay. So that's why we made the point yesterday of the importance of relying on those and, if necessary, having a copy of them as you walk the job. There also is a certificate of plan approval. This is part of that packet. This certificate essentially establishes the criteria that the building design represents and any other outside information such as variances and stipulations, certain conditions of the approval. Also remember that a list of required inspections, if required, for the project would be included in this package. And the building official is going to give an on-site inspection record to the owner with the certificate of plan approval. I just want to caution you as inspectors, when you're called to come out to do an inspection at a site, you need to make sure that this information is on the site. If any of these things is missing, you should tell the owner or tell the contractor that this information is required and that you cannot perform the inspection until you have that information. Now, if your building department has iPads and things like that that you use for your part of your service, a lot of departments now are preloading the construction documents for the projects so that when you show up to the site, you already have them on the iPad and you can refer to them as you do the inspection. And that's becoming more of a thing now that we've entered the digital age and more things are being submitted to the building department electronically. There may not be physical drawings anymore with regards to doing your job. So just a heads up on that. If you're not tech savvy, you want to keep working on that. Okay, and then we did talk yesterday about the issue of local permit versus a certificate of plan approval. The key is what is required according to our rules to be on the job site and posted so that everyone can see it, is the certificate of plan approval. The local authority may require the same requirement for the permit, and that's fine. We really don't care. What matters is the certificate of plan approval. Okay, so you've seen this already. It's a little different color. I'm punching up the fact that today we're talking about required inspections. We've already talked about this process already. We've danced around it in this presentation already. But a couple of things to keep in mind is that the required inspections is about verifying work in compliance with the documents. You're involved with that as a building inspector, and the owner is involved, meaning and or the owner's representative, the contractor, and possibly the designer, because the designer comes out to the job as well at times to look at quality control and things like that. But there's an interchange when you're doing the verification. Okay, so if you're citing things in the inspection report that something is deficient, meaning it doesn't comply with the approved documents, you're communicating that information to the owner and or their representative. Certifications of tests and building systems are completed and submitted to the building official. That's something that the owner and the inspectors will be doing, looking at those tests, verifying that things are done, understanding that when a contractor issues a certification on a system. And then the other thing about required inspections is that if there were variances or subsequent approvals, because you could have a project that has multiple phases, that you need to make sure that they are inspected and compliant. It gets a little tricky when you have phased approvals because usually there's obviously interconnection of the construction, but there's also interconnection of the inspection process. And just one other dynamic is that you can have multiple inspectors doing inspections and re-inspections, and we'll talk a little bit more about that interchange later. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about personnel responsibilities. We did talk about these things yesterday. I'm going to just kind of fly over this information, but we're going to focus on a couple other things with regards to liability and also violation of duties. Okay, so as we said yesterday, this section has now essentially been vacated out of Chapter 1 of the 2024 Ohio Building Code, and all this information now has gone into the Ohio Administrative Code as basically duties and responsibilities. So an inspector is responsible for determining that work is performed in compliance with the approved documents. You're going to hear me say this all day, okay? It is your job to verify that work matches those documents. And remember, we're talking about the approved documents. When you're out on the job site, there's going to be a bunch of copies of the documents. They may not be the approved documents. They could be construction drawings that the contractor has specifically for the scope of his work. He may have a bid set out there. He could have a permitted set that isn't been stamped and approved by the building department. It's just a copy from the designer. You want to make sure that you're always working from the approved set, the one version that the building official has stamped and approved. That is the one that we're enforcing. You are not also verifying what you determine meets the code. You are looking at the documents and you are checking for that exactness between the construction and the documents. And you will need to access the, you will need to access the approved documents while you inspect. Also, all inspectors shall inspect the work to the extent of the approval for which the inspection was requested. So if you're out there for a framing inspection, then you're going to do just the extent of that inspection. You're not going to go back and look at the foundation or other things that has already been inspected and approved, or meaning verified to comply with the building approved building documents. So like I said, with phase approvals, it does get a little tricky. You need to know the extent of the scope of the type of approval that it is. It could be a nonconformance approval, which, sorry about that. I should have struck that. We no longer have a nonconformance approval in Chapter 1. We just have conditional, phased, and annual. So the ones that remain, they do have limitations. Conditional, the contractor may have a conditional approval and he started work on the footings and foundations and the undergrounds, but he can't proceed past that until he's already submitted, meaning the designer submitted the balance of the construction documents for review and approval. If they are phased approvals, you're just going to do that phase. If if you're out there to do inspections of, let's say, the start of it, the footings, foundations, the slab on grade floor, um, any undergrounds, including building system equipment. It could be underground ductwork, things of that nature. Um, those are the things you're going to be looking at. But if you notice that they also called for a framing inspection, and they've already started framing on one corner of the building, and they don't have an approval for that yet, you need to be aware of that. You need to tell them that they have to stop work until they get their phase approval for framing. So be aware of how sometimes, you know how it is, they're on a fast track, they have a stop dead date on their project. Contractors are working as fast as they can. They're doing everything. Sometimes, if they can get away with it, out of order to keep things moving quickly. In their minds, it's ready to build on, but it may not be inspected and approved yet by the building inspector, as in verified to comply. So be aware of that. Just be cognizant of where the project is and not just what you're there to do. Duties and responsibilities have also been moved over to 41017. And the key here, though, is that it says in there that all inspectors shall effectively communicate the results of their inspections. Remember, you are a communicator. You're not an enforcer in the strictest sense of the approval. That's actually the building official. Communication is done in a very specific way per section 108. So when we get there, we'll talk about those specifics. We also talked about this yesterday, that inspectors are to conduct themselves in a professional, courteous, impartial, responsive, and cooperative manner. Remember, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing your political subdivision. You're also, in a way, you're representing the Board of Building Standards in the state of Ohio. Your conduct means to cause oneself to act or behave in a controlled manner. Okay? That's conduct. And then have a reputation of good character and perform your duty being above reproach. Okay? You want to make sure that you're doing things the right way. And you want to make sure that no one could ever say anything against you because of how you have been performing your duty. So, how do we do this? Well, I think it goes back to this issue of conducting ourselves in a certain way. So I'm going to define it a little bit more. Your duty, no matter your assigned responsibility in your certified position, is to conduct yourself in a manner that is, and the first word is professional. Professional means to be businesslike, competent, knowledgeable. That's what a professional is. Courteous means to be very polite, respectful, and deferring. Deferring is a hard one because we want to just kind of take charge of things, but we also want to respect and really defer the conversation to the people we're talking with so that they can be heard. That's courtesy, being polite and doing that. Impartial means to not be biased, and it means to be fair and equal in your treatment of either people or even construction. But the key here is that when we have a bias about something, let's say we've done something as a contractor before we entered this business of enforcement, that we've always done it this way when we constructed this or that on a project. And then we come along as an inspector and we see that this contractor is doing it a different way. And we want to feel like we need to tell them that the way they're doing it is the wrong way, when it may not be the wrong way. The end result may still be the same. So that's why we want to be careful to not be biased in our approach. And then fourth thing is responsive. Be a quick listener. Be sympathetic and be willing to answer, meaning listen to what they say, then answer their question. Last thing is be cooperative, means to work together, be willingly helpful. So this is usually not a problem with inspectors or with anyone else for that matter, especially if they are just very passionate about their work and about what they're doing. But cooperative means to essentially work with the contractor as you're doing the inspections. If you walk along and you realize that, hey, everything on this framing is done except they didn't finish this area, they're going to ask you, well, can you at least, I'm going to finish building this tomorrow. It's going to be exactly the way this other stuff is. You need to be able to say, you know, I appreciate what you're telling me and that I have confidence that you're going to finish it that way, but I can't approve that, or meaning I can't say that that complies until it's completed. So then you willingly, in a helpful way, say, I'll take a look at my schedule. If you guys have it done pretty quickly, I'm sure we can get somebody else back out here. And we'll do our best to get out here to get the thing completely signed off. If that can't happen, we'll be there within the 4 days for sure. So anyway, the point being is just that being cooperative means to be able to do what you can within the limitations that you have with respect to building code enforcement. We want to educate people. We need to communicate to them, and they need to understand that we're actually on their side. We have the same objective as they do. The building needs to be completed and it needs to be safe for the new occupants. Remember, above all else, communication is key. All these things that I just mentioned, these 5 things, really is about communication. It's a standard of care, and it does involve some effort and some time and quality service. Okay, so we're just going to kind of skim this. Obviously, required inspection certification types. I'm not sure what you're here today for and what type of inspector certification you're seeking. But the main thing is that we have building inspectors, both residential and commercial. We want to make sure that if you have both, you can do both. If you have a commercial inspector um, certification, you shouldn't be doing residential. If you have a residential one, you shouldn't be asked to do commercial work. So now, if you are starting to get interim certifications to do those things, then you can do those duties. But make sure you keep that clear for yourself. It's to protect your own certifications. And then other types of inspectors, such as plumbing and electrical, again, residential, commercial. Um, some of you you're here because you're trying to get a plumbing certification. You already have been educated by the state because you work for a county board of health and have done plumbing, and you're getting your certification through the board now. Just remember that we don't see any difference in what you have in terms of your previous certification. But we do want you to know that if you are an electrical inspector or a plumbing inspector and you have no other types of certifications, you should not be dispatched or asked to do other certified inspector duties and responsibilities. Okay, so let's all stay in our lane based on our certifications. Okay, there are two other classes. There's elective inspectors, and these are ones that are basically kind of outside our purview. Um, Medical gas is board certified inspectors that may be employed by the department, but they have a certification through the state of Ohio. Other inspectors on a project not certified by the board may be involved as part of the project inspection team. So these other inspectors are not your team, but they are still on the team for the building. So if you have boilers, elevators, or if you're having special inspections done, DIC, the Division of Industrial Compliance, does the elevators and the boilers. Special inspections could come from the design professional record on the project, or they could be people who come from a business that is a recognized conformity assessment body with the board. Coordination is key. All inspectors are required to coordinate their efforts with other inspections to verify that the work is completed. This should be obvious, but inspections must be completed in order. So we expect, of course, the footings and foundations to be done first. And when it's approved, then you can build upon it with framing. And while the framing is being done, they can also start building the electrical and the plumbing systems into the framing. And all these things logically follow one another during construction, but they have to follow one another also with regards to inspections. So if they start putting up drywall on the wall and the framing inspection hasn't been done, including the plumbing and the electrical, then you can ask them to take that down. Okay, let's talk about liability. First off, I got to tell you, the only reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's mentioned in the code, but we are not lawyers. We are not your prosecutor or your law director. But we do want to provide a little bit of understanding on this topic. If you have specific questions with regards to liability, you have to talk to the folks at the jurisdiction that you work at. Okay. So let's talk about it though in terms of describing this issue from the standpoint of the Ohio Revised Code, because this is really where this originates. Liability of certified building department personnel for any tortious act will be determined by Ohio courts to the applicable provisions in the Ohio Revised Code. So a couple words in there we need to define. Liability means being made responsible to pay for offenses to someone harmed. And then tort is an action that wrongly causes harm to someone, but that is not a crime and that is dealt with in a civil court. Okay. Liability of certified building department personnel. To be protected, it says the employee's action or failure to act that gave rise to the cause of action under the tort law had to be within the discretion of the employee with respect to policymaking, planning, or enforcement powers before the protection of the statute can be invoked, unless one of the following exists. Okay, so remember, let's look back up at the top. It says to be protected. You are protected unless one of the following things occurred. One, if your acts or omissions were manifestly outside the scope of your employment or your official responsibilities. So if you have a side hustle going in construction and something comes up with regards to a problem on the site and someone is saying, I'm going to sue you for this, you weren't acting in the capacity as a building inspector, building official, or plans examiner. So you're not going to have any liability coverage by the building department or by the jurisdiction. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Number two is his acts or omissions were with malicious purpose, in bad faith, or in wanton manner, reckless manner. In other words, don't be the sheriff in town. okay? You don't want to be doing things to basically push your ego, to push other people around, excuse me. So don't do anything maliciously or in bad faith or in a reckless manner when you're doing building code enforcement. And then the third thing, if you want to be protected, if the third thing happens, you won't be protected. Liability is expressly imposed upon the employee by the section of the revised code. So what we're saying here is that if you're doing your duties and responsibilities with your building department in your jurisdiction, they have liability coverage for you. But as soon as you step outside of the boundaries of what that protection gives you, either in one or two, you may not be covered. I mean, you're covered, but what it's going to mean is this. If the employee is sued, the political subdivision has a responsibility to defend you if you prevail in the action. If the employee acts within the scope of his or her job duties, the employee has the protection and is unlikely to be successfully sued. So the liability coverage doesn't mean you won't be sued, okay? It just means that if you prevail in the case, that the subdivision will basically pay for all your expenses. Okay? If you lose, guess who pays? I think you know the answer. Remember this, the board or their staff do not provide legal advice on these matters. Okay, I'm just telling you that the code mentions liability. Okay, how it's executed at the local level, you need to talk to them about it. It's highly recommended that you contact the political subdivision's legal counsel, such as the law director or prosecutor, for guidance with these issues. Okay, next one. So let's see. Okay, this one here is violations of duties. And basically, it's when we get a complaint. Okay, that part up there at the top about liability of certified personnel, that's not correct. So just ignore that. Now we're moving on and talking about violations of duties and responsibilities. What it says. Any person affected by alleged improper actions of any building department, building official, plans examiner, inspectors, fire protection system designers, or local boards of building appeals. Now, the reason why it mentions these groups of people is because the Board of Building Standards certifies these individuals or these entities. So anyone that's adversely affected by the performance of any of these entities may file a written complaint with the board. Now, it has to be in writing. This is what makes it a legitimate complaint to be received by the board. If someone just calls us and says that they have a complaint about something, we will tell them that we can look into it, but if they want us to deal with the issue and investigate it, we have to have it in writing. Because the Board of Building Standards once a month meets and they look at complaints and they determine whether or not the complaint needs to be dismissed or if a authorization for an an investigation occurs, or they can table it to request additional information from the complainant. So we do follow certain procedures when it comes to dealing with complaints. Let me just say, everybody complains in the world, okay? I do, we all do it, okay? Some people are just blowing off steam and a simple fix makes them happy again. Other people complain because there are legitimate things that they're being affected by. And they feel like this isn't right. But here's the thing about complaints is that they're usually learning experiences, right? Um, unless someone is they just can't help themselves and they just want to complain about everything. But here's the thing is that we want to make sure that as you perform your duties and responsibilities, if you're doing things the way that we just talked about in the last several slides, like the last 10 slides, that the chances of getting a complaint are going to be negligible. Okay. You probably wouldn't get anything you couldn't just deal with on the site in terms of working with someone and helping them understand and working together to get closure on, say, the inspection results. So, but when we get complaints, we take them seriously, and we always wind up calling the building official to get additional information. We know there's two sides of the story. We get that. We don't take sides. We try to remain as unbiased as possible when we hear complaints from constituents. We are advocates for you, but we're also advocates for the constituents in Ohio. They should be being served well. So I just wanted to mention that violation of duties is an issue. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. These are the types of complaints that we generally receive. Sometimes there's gross negligence in the performance of the duties of the inspector. Sometimes there's incompetence. Maybe they just don't understand. They've been assigned to do a certain type of inspection and they've never done it before. And so they don't, incompetence doesn't necessarily mean that they're stupid. It just means that they're not informed enough or they learned enough about a particular area about buildings. And yet their certification requires them to do those inspections. My recommendation is you should always have a learning mind. If you show up at a job site, inspector, and you're confronted with something you've never seen before, call your buddy who has been doing this for 30 years and ask them about it. Say, hey, help me understand what's going on here. I'm looking at the construction documents. It looks like it's correct, but when they performed the test, this happened. So always be learning. And if you have questions or about something after you perform an inspection, at the end of the day, go back and look at the code book and learn a little bit more about it. Okay. But here's again, if someone is doing things in an incompetent way, that's a legitimate reason to hear the complaint. We just need to find out what's going on. And also misconduct in the performance of duties. Let's say you got your way of doing things, and that way isn't really matching up with what the board's way is. We'll find out about it eventually. Also, engaging in conduct is considered a conflict of interest. The graphic on the right is the best way I can explain this. You are hired by a public entity to, and you're entrusted with the public good. Okay, that's the best way to put it. Your concern is their concerns. Okay, your concern cannot be about your money, your career, your prestige. That cannot come first as you're doing your duty to the public. It may be a nice benefit, the consequence of doing good work, but it is not your goal. Your goal is to work towards the public good. And then violation of duties described in section 104, and most notably enforcing codes instead of the approval or the approved documents. You may be very sharp and know the codes very well. And you may see something and somehow this didn't get approved quite right, which is something we'll talk about later on how to resolve those things. But you want to be thinking about the approved documents and the approval when you're enforcing. You have your knowledge base. We understand that. You have your experience. We understand that. All that helps you do your job. But you have to remember why and what you're doing. Those documents are basically your Bible when it comes to doing your inspections. So what it means, you are accountable to many entities regarding your duties and responsibilities, not just to the board, but to the building official who's the one responsible for administrating the whole building department. Also to your elected officials, because they're the ones who own the certification of the building department. It's not the building official, it's the elected officials. However, if violations to the board's rules occur, you could be disciplined or decertified or suspended or maybe put on probationary status if what the complaint said was true. That's when we work with the certified individual to correct things that they're doing incorrectly. All right, now let's talk about the inspection program. See how we doing? Okay, 9:30. All right, so we're going to talk about the process of inspections. So after those documents are approved, construction or work may proceed. Now that's in accordance with the Ohio Revised Code. So we talked about the difference between approvals and permits yesterday. Permits are local instruments for perhaps all types of approvals for a building and its site. So we understand that. The certificate of plan approval basically has one specific purpose, and that is to say that this design complies with the building code. Therefore, if you choose to build it, it will be a safe building. If you didn't have a permit at the local level, the certificate of plan approval, according to the Ohio Revised Code, is your license to build. So as soon as you have that, you're allowed to start building. Now, the local requirement may be such that it's still acknowledging that the certificate of plan approval is a license to build and that you can start building it. But it also says, hey, wait a minute, for you to put your approved building on this piece of land, this piece of land has to be approved. In other words, we want to make sure that you're putting it in the right place, not infringing upon easements or setbacks or anything like that. And I think you get my drift. Approved building is the certificate of plan approval, and approved site is all the local stuff that goes on, which usually is the permit. The permit can capture the CPA as one of those blanket permit approvals, okay? Access. We know what this is. It is the owner's responsibility to provide it. And they have to cause the work to remain accessible and exposed for inspection purposes. You put a bunch of stuff in front of a wall that you need to inspect, you can tell them to move it so that you can inspect it. All right. Work shall remain accessible and exposed to verify compliance. What it means is that the inspector must document the issue. If they can't get to the work, you still have a responsibility to document that in the inspection record, and you can indicate that work could not be completed and that reinspection would need to be called for once those materials have been moved away from the construction. You do have that right to do that. Okay, this is with regards to how long after someone calls for an inspection does the inspection have to occur. The section says that within 4 days of when it's called. So remember, the contractors are on a deadline. Contractors are pushing the work, and they will most likely document when they called you, meaning the building department. If they know this section of the code, they know that if you don't show up in 4 days to the minute, they will start working on the next phase because they have the right to do that. This is why we have to be prompt. We need to be on time. We need to be within the limitation of when to do the inspection. You may be slammed right now and are having trouble getting all the inspections in. It's up to the building official to ensure that everything is getting covered and that everything is being reviewed in terms of the projects. He or she is responsible to track and audit all the projects in the queue. Okay. So the bottom line is that the department is required to manage timely inspections. Subsequent work is allowed to proceed only to the point of the next required inspection if you've gone beyond 4 days. So in other words, if the contractor covers up the wall and the electrical, plumbing, and framing hasn't been inspected, but they were all called for and no one showed up, the contractor does not have to take down the drywall. I don't know how you're going to do it, You can look from underneath if there's a basement. You can look from above. You can look at angles, but you can't tell them to take off the drywall. Required inspections. Okay, so we talked about the importance of having an accurate listing of required inspections on every given project based on the scope of the project and perhaps even the phases if there are phases. Generally speaking, we say that a boilerplate inspection list isn't acceptable only because they usually just get released. And maybe a third of those inspections won't be applicable to the project that is to be inspected. So we want to make sure that a list of all required inspections for each project is accurate. Okay. The building official shall cause inspections to be set forth in the inspection list by the appropriately certified inspector in accordance with the approved documents. So we talked about this earlier. If you are just an electrical inspector, and I'm not saying just, if you, because you know a lot, but electrical inspectors, if for some reason someone, a building inspector or a clerk, excuse me, building official or a clerk assigns you to do something that you are not certified to do, just go back and tell them you can't do it because of the certification. Okay, we want to make sure that everyone is properly assigned based on their expertise to do the inspections they're supposed to do. Okay. Session 2 will talk about the specifics of required inspections. So right of entry, this one is really quite simple. Basically, we're trying to, again, strike the line on the difference between lawful entry into a building or a premises versus trespassing. If you're trespassing, usually the police are involved and people are really upset. So let's just make sure that we know where the line is. Building inspector, or excuse me, the building official or their designee, the inspector, is authorized to enter the structure. Okay, so you're already authorized to do so. Building code says that you're going to be doing this work and that this is your responsibility to enter those structures, but you're supposed to do it at reasonable times. And I would also add to that, or within the policy of the building department. You may have a policy that your inspections start at 7 a.m. and you're trying to accommodate contractors because they like to get these things done and out of the way in the morning so they can have a full day of work ahead of them. Or it could be the individual homeowner that starts work really early and he isn't home till it's 5 o'clock, but he will be happy to have you come at 6 o'clock to do the inspection. So whatever your policy is, that's what you want to adhere to. But here's the thing, when you show up, you need to show your credentials, meaning who you represent, the building department, the jurisdiction, and that you ask to come in, as in, may I come into the structure to perform an inspection? Be that disciplined about it. You're telling them what you want to do, what you want to, and that you want to go in and look at the work. And then make sure that they say yes, and that's the easy answer. Yes, you may come in. So you want to hear that because it'll be your word against theirs if there's any disagreement about it later. Okay. Right of entry again is that um, under normal circumstances with inspections, this is usually not an issue. It could be as simple as just going to the job trailer and say, "Hey, I'm here. Let's take a look at the documents and let's talk about what we're going to look at here real quick today before we go walk the job." You already have been given right of entry to enter the site, and you've already been acknowledged by the site superintendent. So there's not really a formality per se of right of entry on a job site. But when it's an occupied building already, that's different. You need to make sure you're checking in at the front desk or checking in with the owner at the door of the house or at the apartment. So anyway, all that to say is I think you get it. Let's just make sure that we're always doing the right thing. Okay, so there's times though where someone reports a serious hazard. So where permission to enter has been obtained and it's denied, someone doesn't want you to come in to see something, or the building official has probable cause to believe that there exists in that structure a serious hazard. It says that the building official can proceed under Section 109 for remedies or recourse provided by law to secure entry, meaning an administrative search warrant from the prosecutor or the law director. So let's say you show up and because someone has made a complaint against a neighbor and that they're building an addition on the back of the house that no one can see except the neighbor, and you've already checked that there's no approval at that location. And so you show up and you ask the owner if you can come in or go to the back of the building because you've been contacted that work is being done without an approval. In our minds, it's fraud. We don't want to say fraud to them because it puts them on the wrong, puts them in the wrong place. We just want to say we're here to verify if you're doing work without an approval. Okay. That's just nice administrative language. If they say no, that's when you come back with the administrative search warrant, hand it to them, and you might even want to have a police officer there. It's up to the situation. Um, and they need to let you in or let you have access to the back of the property. Okay. Again, this is right of entry. The difference between lawful entry and trespassing. Don't throw your weight around on this issue. So when it's denied by the owner, you want to remain professional. You want to leave the site. You want to contact the building official and you want to record the event. Okay. So I've asked this question before. What happens if a child comes to the front door? You're going to ask them for right of entry? No, you don't want to do that. You want to ask them to have mom or dad come to the door. And if no one shows up and it just is kind of a stalemate in that way, then you remain professional, you leave the site, you contact the building official. Okay. We just want to make sure that we're not crossing boundaries. Um, so when an inspector finds that work is in accordance with the approved documents, they need to make a note on the on-site inspection record and communicate the findings to the building official. And once all the work's done from all those inspections, the CVO is issued. So when an inspector finds work that is contrary to the approved documents, the inspector is to proceed to section 10861 or 1087. So let's talk about that. 10861 basically says that you're communicating the nature of the differences to the owner or their on-site representative. All right, meaning that the work doesn't comply in this way. And now the owner has three options to decide what to do. They can change the work in the field to make it match the documents. They can change the documents to get a reapproval for the difference in what's been built and what is in the drawings. Or the owner can just do neither. So when it's neither, option three, then it becomes option four. You're communicating to the building official, and oftentimes the building official will then issue an adjudication order requiring the owner to either fix the work in the field or change the documents, or they can appeal it to a board of building appeals. So it's communicated, this information is communicated on the on-site inspection record, okay? Remember, this is two-way communication. You've done your inspection, you're writing things down. The contractor may have walked the job with you, already knows what has been found, and they're talking to you the whole way, right? Oh, we'll take care of that. Well, we'll take care of that. Well, we'll have you come back tomorrow morning. Is this okay if we just leave it this way? You're going to hear lots of different propositions to you about how to get that inspection to pass. So we don't want to tell the owner or the representative what to do. We just have to revert back and say, look, you have options. Just make a decision and we'll roll with it. And you're going to document that decision on the on-site inspection record. So here's our example of that language in a form that we have in the building department resource packet. So this is preloaded. There's another piece of paper associated with this. Most likely it has all the required inspections for this project, and they've called for footing and foundations. And you've shown up at the date, and I recommend that you always put the time that you came to do the inspection. You put your name. Don't put scribbly. I still see it. Anytime I go to a building department, I'll see an inspector will scribble his initials on it. And I can't tell who it is. Okay. The only way to figure it out is to ask the clerk to look it up on the database and to tell me who the actual inspector was that did it. It's good to put your name down kind of in a neat way, at least so people know who was there. And then you, as the inspector, you're going to write down the things you observed that were not in compliance. Okay. And then see that last column? Then that contractor is going to tell you how they're going to proceed. Now, we don't have to write all of that, but sometimes it's worth it. So if they say, yeah, we're going to choose number one, we're going to fix it, and they are going to say what they're going to do. So just scratch that into the record, okay? We want to avoid alternative ways to communicate this process. I know that some of you use tags and stickers, and you may even might have some of these sticky notes sitting in your truck. This is not an inspection record, okay? The inspection record is that and whatever you put in your own log, which could be something on your iPad, or maybe you have a written log that you keep. If your department is still in paper mode and you're still writing things on pads, like official pads for inspections, and then you come back and you log all that stuff into the system, that's the way you got to do it. If you're doing everything electronically, I'm sure you're really happy about it, because most of these systems now allow you to put everything in. You just type it all in, and then you hit send, and that information goes back to the building official, goes to the contractor standing right beside you, and it pings his phone or his iPad, and you have the record in your iPad. That's the beauty and the efficiency of the digital age, I guess. Anyway, you want to avoid the cryptic notes, the use of tags and things like that. Remember, a sticker, eventually, if you stick it to something, it'll get covered up. So now the record's gone. You want to avoid verbal communication. The reason why is because, excuse me, if you tell a contractor to do something, they will not only do it, they may go way beyond what you told them. Okay? They'll take your word and run with it. So, you just want to be careful, because it will become your word against theirs. And this isn't really a good way to record things. I noticed in the chat, someone mentioned something about photos and uploading those. Good point. Photographs are always a good idea, especially when you're investigating serious hazards, because you want that documentation to show to the building official. If you have the ability to take pictures, not a bad idea to do that. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this really comes in handy if you have a phone that has a camera, which most do now. Take a picture of something that's not in compliance, because you can use that when you show up at the reinspection to verify that they actually changed it. We don't want them to just tell us, yeah, we took care of that already. You still have to check it. Okay, and then revise sketches on the approved documents. I understand that things get thought through in the field. And sometimes contractors will say, well, how about if we did this? And they're going to sketch in a red pen on the approved documents the condition and how they're going to do it. You cannot accept that. You need to say, look, the documents show it this way. You need to do it this way. Okay. If the picture looks like it's legitimate, tell them, hey, that may be a good idea. Once you have the designer, send it into the building department, and we'll have a plan examiner do a quick review of it, and we'll approve it if it's approvable. Okay. But if it's not, we have to let it go. We should avoid writing anything on those, and so should the contractor. Okay. That approved set is what it is. Also, we want to avoid personal interpretations of the code. Okay. I get it. They want to talk about the code. Well, why doesn't this work? Right? I've done this in other jurisdictions and on other jobs, and no one has ever said anything to me like this before. You need to say, look, I can't tell you an interpretation on this. Right? I just know that what you built doesn't match the approved documents. If you want to continue this discussion, contact the building official, and you guys can work through the process of getting this approved. Okay? That's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you stay out of the way of the approval. You're just checking and making sure that the approval is getting done. And then last thing, well-meaning threats. Okay. I get it. Man, people can push your buttons. There are folks that are surly out there who they just don't give and you got to work with these folks. We're supposed to be professional, we're supposed to be cooperative, those 5 things that we went over earlier. We just want to make sure that we don't get caught up in their emotion and in their circumstances. They may be under a lot of pressure from the owner to get this project done, and that's not your problem. Okay. You can sympathize with them. You say, man, I've been in that situation before. I'm sorry this is going on, but this isn't in compliance. You need to fix this so that this can pass. Okay. As long as you're taking that kind of tact, you'll be able to diffuse, hopefully, the situation. There are times where people get really forceful. I get it. But we don't want to join in with them and then turn it into a retaliation. Well, if you don't do it, right, that's what we don't want to ever say, as if somehow we're going to penalize them or take something away from them. It's just going to make them more mad. So let's make sure we're not doing inappropriate or unacceptable types of behavior or communication. We already covered this in that last slide. That's just a couple other little comments. When you're doing your inspection record, we don't want to just write in okay or pass in there. We want to indicate that it complies or does not comply. We got to stick to that language because that's what the building code says. And then the other things we already talked about. So let's keep moving. All right, avoid alternative ways. Again, your personal interpretations. We don't want to do that. We can talk about the code. We can talk about the possibilities with them, but it's up to them to execute it. We are not going to stand there and say, well, that sounds reasonable. I think I can accept that. Okay, we can't do that. That is the building official's responsibility. Okay, he makes those determinations. And then communication for work contrary to the approved construction documents. Okay, so this is when we know it hasn't passed, doesn't comply, it doesn't match. So when if the owner or their on-site representative indicates that they're not going to bring it into compliance and that they're not going to revise the construction documents, you as the inspector need to document this, okay? And the reason why is because this issue may go to appeal. and your building official will have to attend that hearing, and he needs to know everything about this condition. So what you're going to do is you're going to document this condition. When they say they're not going to fix it and they're not going to change it, they're asking for an adjudication order. So part of the package that you're going to prepare, in essence, for the building official, because you are his eyes and ears out in the field, is you're going to create a report. And it doesn't have to look like this one. This is our version of it in the building department resource packet, but it covers everything that we believe is necessary information for the building official to be able to defend the position, your position, in a hearing. Okay. So this is for your good as well. So this report needs to be descriptive. It is a record. And the building official uses this report um, to communicate this information to the owner in an adjudication order. Then the owner can choose to appeal it. And then this report information will be the information and probably the pictures. I always recommend in these type of situations that you take the pictures so that the building official understands the whole thing. And he uses this when the owner makes that request for the hearing. So again, building official is the one that makes these determinations. We are documenting the conditions, okay? So in the chat here that appeals occur, generally speaking, every 2 weeks. If your jurisdiction goes to a local board of building appeals, and there's 7 of them basically in Ohio, and most of them are in the big cities. So you got Columbus, you have Cincinnati, Cleveland, and you have others peppered in the state. Excuse me, as well as departments that have contracted with them to have hearings done through those local boards of appeals. If you're not going to those, you're going to the State Board of Appeals. State Board of Appeals meets twice a month, usually at the end of the month and the middle of the month, and they alternate locations. So they'll be in Columbus for one of those sessions in a month, and they'll be in the Mansfield area or Ashland, Ohio, the second set of hearings. So I suppose the good thing is that with the State Board of Appeals, there is a little bit more of a frequency. Some local boards of appeals only meet once a month because they don't have as much activity as the State Board of Appeals does. But in the adjudication order, that information is fairly clear. And I think the owner understands that when they make an appeal, they have to get on the agenda of the local Board of Appeals by filing the necessary information and then be ready to be showing up at that hearing. So good. That's a good question, though. Remember, the other thing here is that in that section with regards to the inspector's report, it says that the building official shall evaluate that inspector's report and render a final determination as to whether the items of noncompliance are to be communicated to the owner in the form of an adjudication order complying with Section 109. So here's the catch. When you get that, you want to get that report done quickly, and you want to get it in the building official's hands because they have to make a determination within 4 days of your report. In other words, they want to get the adjudication order out as quickly as possible because we don't want to delay the owner or the representative in keeping the project going. So hopefully that's clear. Let's see, someone also mentioned, I think it depends on the jurisdiction, how many adjudication orders are issued. Yes, that's true. Mostly people just want to get the work completed and we'll figure it out. Totally agree. Most people do not want to get stalled in appeals. I've done it in the past as an architect because it was going to cost a lot of money if we didn't go ahead and shoot for the variance. So it's something's going to drive the decision of the owner. But the main thing is remember, this is a legal process, what we're administrating. So the owner makes all the decisions in this legal process. We communicate back in response to their communication and their decisions. So that's why we want to make sure that when we get into these kind of situations, we do have to break these things down a little bit. We do need to do our due diligence to document things. We do need to make sure that the building official is making determinations. Because if we don't, then we are in little ways denying the owner's right to appeal. In other words, to make another decision, to make a change in what they want to do. So, as we said yesterday, when you go to appeals board, there are basically three things that you can ask for if you're the owner. You can ask for a new interpretation of the building code that's in question as that part of that violation, and the appeals board can render a new interpretation, in essence, reverse the order. They can also request a variance from the requirement, and it's up to the owner and their representative to make the case that they still would basically comply even if they changed it and didn't directly comply with the requirement. And so we probably are more familiar with that approach than anything else. The third one's obvious. I mean, you're going into the appeals board and you're saying this is just not right. And we're asking you to reverse the order of the building official. Usually they don't prevail when they take that approach, but it has happened. It was based on the scope of the project, the type of condition, and the Board of Appeals sided with the owner. So anyway, good information so far. So we are at 10 o'clock. So let's go ahead
Hey, hey
and take
Rob.
a break for 10 minutes.
Hey Rob.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions I wanted to bring to your attention in the chat.
Okay.
There was one question about while performing an inspection, such as an electrical final, for example, should the inspector check every device or just a handful throughout the structure?
Great question. So yesterday, I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit today, you'll notice that in section 108, there's really only one instance where a final inspection is mentioned. Technically, there is no final inspections. Technically, what we have is inspections and re-inspections. So if in the course of doing electrical inspections, whether it's by phase or by progress of the work, if, and okay, let me back up for a second. A lot of you use some terminology that isn't in the code. You say things like, we do rough inspections and we do final inspections, and then we'll do completions, or sometimes what's called an occupancy inspection. Okay. Basically, none of those three things exist in the building code. Okay. So the way the code is written is that when work is ready for inspection, the inspection takes place. If it is in compliance with the documents, the inspection is completed. There is no need for a reinspection or for a final inspection. But when you're doing work that's in a progressive manner, meaning that you're called in to check all the devices in the walls, all the boxes in the ceilings, um, and the conductors have been pulled into them, and that's what's been called for the inspection, then of course you do that inspection to verify those different junctures of the system. And it passes, which means that the electrical contractor, when the work is ready, can install the actual appliances that get connected to these boxes and these conductors. And then you come out and you basically verify that that's been done. Usually you can't see the wiring. Once that stuff is up, you can't make them take it back down to make sure they wired it correctly. It's presumed to have been installed correctly. Now, if there is the ability to access things such as panels where the front's taken off and you're checking all the grounding and all the things that are in there, AFCI protection, all that jazz, then that's, again, another electrical inspection. And the inspection, once completed, means it complies with the approved construction documents. Okay, so that's how I want you to think about inspections, is that when you get to that last electrical inspection, meaning it's that last bit, that last phase, that last progressive piece that needs to be checked in order to say that all the electrical is now in compliance. You don't get a second bite at the apple. You're not going to go back and look at everything else. You're just looking at what's left. That's it. Okay. That makes sense?
So, uh, part of the question was also, is a sampling allowed to be inspected? Does the code require that every instance of an element under the required inspection be inspected?
That's another very good question. The short answer is yes, technically everything should be checked. Now, where you get into buildings where there's repetitiveness, such as hotels, okay, virtually every single room is going to be the same. There may be some differences where you have the suite or the presidential suite, or the upgraded rooms that have the jacuzzi versus just a standard bath. What you could do in those circumstances is you can say, okay, in order to make this work, so that I'm not here for a half a week trying to check every single hotel room for all the plumbing fixtures, you can tell the contractor when you're ready for either a block of them or for the whole building, give us a call and we'll come out and do the inspection. You, as the inspector, can start and do, say, 3 or 4 of, let's say there's 3 types, okay? You're going to do 3 or 4 of type 1 room. And if everything looks good every time, then maybe you can skip one and you check the next one. If that one's good, maybe you skip 2 and you check that one. What we're looking for is consistency in the installation of the products. But as soon as you hit one where it says, where it's like, well, this one's not done right, now you should go back about 4 rooms and check the ones that you missed and see if there's consistency again. And you're going to flag that one room that you caught as not in compliance. And then you start over. You do 4, skip 1, skip another one. You see my point? So as long as that works for each type of room in that building, then it is feasible that you can reduce the load in that way. But again, you got to look for consistency. When it is not in compliance, then that means you got to slow down and you got to start checking them more frequently. And my recommendation is that you start back with the base. You started with 4, 4 looked good. The 5th one you skipped. The 6th one you did, it was still good. The 7th one you skipped, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you get the point. But from a technical standpoint, every device should be inspected. If you're dealing with single family houses, you check them all. If you're dealing with small commercial structures, you should check them all. If you're dealing with things that are high risk, high compliance structures, such as hospitals, you check them all. Okay? Because most of the time there are life safety systems, meaning medical equipment associated with those types of circuitry. Even housekeeping stuff, housekeeping type devices in the walls have a degree of importance in a hospital. So hopefully I answered the question. But, we do want to liberally construe, but we got to be careful, right? We want to make sure that this building is going to be safe. We don't want to skip a bunch of them, and then some of them were electrically not wired correctly, and then there's problems. So we're just thinking about the future.
All right, we got
Was there
one
another
more
question?
one more question.
Okay.
Can a photo of the on-site inspection record uploaded into the department software count as the building department's record of the inspection?
It can. If it's a violation, for sure. That would be the only reason why I think I would take the picture, is if there was a violation. If everything checks out, though, if your jurisdiction requires you to take a picture or two just for the record, then I would follow their policy. If it's not necessary, then you don't need to do it. The code doesn't require it.
All right, that was all the questions we have in the chat.
Okay, we'll see you back in 10 minutes.
Okay, we should be getting started in just a minute. You ready, Rob?
I am here. I'm ready.
All right, let's get to it. Let the magic begin.
Sounds good. Well, welcome back, everyone. I got to tell you that as I get older, it's harder to talk nearly nonstop for 3 hours. So hopefully my voice holds out. 2 hours is good. 3 is long. I'm not complaining. Anyway, hey, welcome back. Hope everything in the first session made sense to you. I'm sure you're going to have questions. Um, and just kind of to remind everyone is that, board staff's here to help you. So when you have interesting situations that come up or questions that you have with regards to technical requirements or even just the building code administration process, feel free to give us a call or email us. We're happy to take those questions and we'll do our best to answer them. So just want to let you know that. Okay, so, seem to be frozen up. Here we go. Okay, so let's see here. I have a feeling I'm not projecting this presentation.
Your presentation is not up yet.
Okay. All right. Is it now?
You've got it now.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of required inspections. So we'll refer to these things as we go through this first part, and there'll actually be a couple other sections following it. Okay. All right. So technology is changing. We've already acknowledged that, but it's changing the way we inspect as well. This is a large facility in Southwest Ohio. Someone sent this to me and they said, hey, look how we're doing inspections. And the reason why they sent this one to me is because I have no idea how high up we are on this drone, but you can see the yellow jacket was interested in the bigger yellow jacket. So it's just kind of hilarious. Anyway, as you continue as a building department to change, I know that the pandemic really pushed us into doing more things electronically. Um, hasn't necessarily changed the fact that people are still required to drive the technology. So your presence out on the site, I'm sure, is meaningful because if we did everything with drones, that would be a totally different type of situation. But they do come in handy with skyscrapers and very large roofs. So when the CPA is issued, we know that the building official provides the documents, the required inspection checklist, and the on-site inspection record. Okay, we've talked about that. We also talked about that the building official, upon notification of the owner, um, that the work is ready for inspection, shall cause the inspections to be done. So what it means is that, again, the right certified inspector has to perform the requested type of inspection. So these are some of the things that we already know, but things that we need to be aware of procedurally as we're performing our duties as inspectors. Okay. So where do we start? You've been dispatched, you've been out to the job site, you're there, and you have gotten right of entry or you've checked in with the superintendent at the job trailer. And now as you're doing your inspection, you need to check for a few things. First off, you want to check for the posting of the CPA. That's the public acknowledgement that this is an approved site and an approved building that's being constructed. So if there isn't one that's, say, on a building, but work's being done on a building, the inspector may pause and stop by and say, hey, I was just checking to see, do you guys have a permit or an approval to do this work? And that's how you catch the people who are basically committing fraud. The ones that we know aren't the issue are the new construction sites, generally speaking. They're usually doing everything by the book. So brand new office buildings, brand new hospitals, brand new houses, generally speaking, the CPA is posted on the site. But you want to make sure and look for that, okay? What happens if it's not there? Do you perform the inspection? I think you can, but you have to talk with the site superintendent and say, hey, where is it? And make sure they get it put back up. If for some reason they say they lost it, then they need to go back into the office and get another one from the building official so that it's posted on the job site. So these are things that this is how we're starting to do the job, okay? When we show up for something we've been dispatched to do. So these are things you're going to check for. Are there approved construction documents on the job site? Is there a certificate of plan approval posted? Is the list of required inspections there? Do they have the on-site inspection record, which is the most important piece of paper if that's how it's being done, because that's what you need to write on. Remember, without this record, you cannot perform the inspection. There's no way of documenting it. And I know that the temptation would be, oh, well, I can go ahead and do the inspection if I just give you a list, and then I'll make a list. It's not official. We don't want to go there. Okay, so essential inspections for verification for safe buildings and their systems. So these are the required inspections in 108. These are intended to be the ones that would apply to every building, okay? So when you show up for that first inspection, you're going to be checking for lot line indications. And these have to be in before any work has been started. A lot of builders won't do that. They'll just mark it out and they'll start digging and start calling for inspections. You want to make sure that that building is going to be where it's supposed to be per the site plan that's been approved, because it can affect a lot of things. If they built too close to another building, now we got a problem. So we're going to be checking for those things, and we're looking for those lot boundaries, those encroachments that have dictated where the building is to be placed, okay? And you need to look at the CPA, because if there were variances granted, you would want to know that, because you may be looking at the site plan and saying, how can they be 5 foot away from the property line? That doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't they have a rated wall there? Right? So then you look at the CPA and it says under conditions, variances, stipulations, that a variance was granted, and that's why that part of the building is the way it is and where it's located on the site. Okay, footings and foundation inspections. So these are done after excavations for the footings are done, and basically the pieces that get buried in the concrete are in place or covered up, such as vapor barriers under slabs. So anyway, it's required that the forms are in place if they are poured concrete foundations. And if materials for the foundations shall be on the job, except where concrete is ready mixed. Okay, so the concrete need not be on the job, but you need to be able to verify what they have. So what are some things that we're going to be checking for this inspection? We need to verify from a soil report that the soil bearing capacity is correct, that they're building it in accordance with those requirements. Let's say that they dug out the entire foundation and they started putting everything in, and the contractor did a bunch of backfill in one corner of the building. You would want to find out why they did that. Most likely it was soil that was bad, and you want to make sure that based on the soil engineer's report, that they followed the recommendations, meaning the contractor followed the recommendations for when soil that is bad or has been disturbed, how that is to be treated, how it is to be replaced, or how it is to be compacted. So we want to make sure that those things have been checked. And then the other thing is, make sure you got a tape measure. You want to check the form widths, make sure that if they said on the plans that it's a 12-inch wall and they're showing a 10-inch, they're going to have to take some forms down and fix it. Check the depth, see if there's any footing steps in the design, any cantilevered conditions. Check for reinforcing ties and steel, the dimensions of the forms. Want to check the concrete quality, if on site, and check for any unique design conditions. That's kind of, when you get the basic box, it's pretty easy, right? Everything's going down to frost. It's a slab on grade building, like a warehouse or something, and everything's good. You just walk around the perimeter and take a few spot checks here and there, and you're done. But if you have a building that's on the side of a hill and there's basements involved and they've had to do regrading and things of that nature, there may be a whole bunch of things that you're going to have to really focus down on and check. Concrete slab and underfloor inspection. So again, prior to concrete going down, basically you need to verify the reinforcing for the concrete. You want to check for building service equipment, conduits, and things of that nature. If there's any underfloor insulation, vapor retarders, any piping accessories, or other types of ancillary equipment that's installed, including the subfloor. So that's the scope of that. That's in 10823. So what do we want to check? Again, it's similar to the footings in the foundation work. You want to verify soil bearing capacity, that verification's been done, and that any corrective measures that have been done has been verified against the construction documents, and that you've looked at the condition. And again, you're looking at more of those on-site checks based on the approved construction documents. Lowest floor elevation. So this primarily deals with floodplains, and when you have buildings that are built in certain zones of a floodplain or just adjacent to it, there are verifications that have to be done. So the contractor, you need to verify the contractor, what they've done with the survey and the site work. In other words, is it all correct? Did they decide to make the basement deeper? Did they change the lowest floor elevation? Those things have to be verified from the survey. Also, the approved construction documents must indicate whether the building is located in the flood hazard area. If it is, the documents have the specified elevation in the lowest floor to be verified. So, if something doesn't look right, ask the contractor to get the transit out and shoot the level. It's a good thing to check. If things are not properly built in these types of areas, it's going to trigger the building code. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things with regards to floodproofing that would have to be installed in buildings that, could be flooded. So anyhow, something to think about. Flood hazard documentation is required. That's in chapter 16. This is part of the approval. The following documentation is to be prepared and sealed by the registered design professional and submitted to the building official. So these following items here, all this is coming out of AC or ASCE 24. All this stuff has to be documented. Okay. And then you're going to verify it when you're out in the field. Frame inspection. So this basically says that before everything's covered up, basically, it can be done after the roof deck or sheathing is put in. But basically, anything that has to do with the exposure of seeing the framing, you want to check that stuff without the removal of members. Okay, so you want to verify the removal of framing members for installation, access to the building surface equipment systems. Did the contractor follow the manufacturer's installation instruction for repairing access to framing? This is always the biggest deal. You have a wood frame building, say a house, and everything looks great. And then the plumber comes in and the electrical guys come in and they start drilling holes, and sometimes large holes. I've seen HVAC contractors put ductwork in through joists where the only thing left in the TGIs was the 2x4s on the top and the bottom. Everything in between was gone. So when you see those kind of situations, you have to call them out because those are violations. And then you have to tell the contractor that they should verify from the manufacturer's installation instructions of the structure of the framing how to correct when too much material has been removed from the member. Most manufacturers of, say, like truss joist type floor framing systems have that information. They need to provide it to you as the inspector, and they need to show you which option they're going to take in correcting the matter. It will require a reinspection. So when you come back out to reinspect what they did to reinforce these members, or maybe take the HVAC ductwork out and put them in a different place where they worked without having to do that work, and then fixing those members, however they choose to do it, that's up to them. But you as the inspector have to verify that they have followed the manufacturer's install instructions on correcting those repairs. Fire resistant
Hey, Rob.
penetrations. This is one of those safety issues. So where the protection of joints and penetrations and fire resistant rated
Rob,
assemblies. Yes.
I think Bruce had a question from the chat he wanted to bring forward.
Okay.
Yeah, it seemed to be relevant since you were talking about what happens if someone takes out too much material. But we got a question where, in the scenario that a contractor finds suspect soil in the footer, excavates the footer to remove the suspect soil, and replaces with crushed stone to proceed with approved plans, do they have to resubmit to the building official? Do they proceed? What should the inspector do in that scenario?
That's a really good question. I, I don't know exactly how everyone does it, to be honest. Usually that corrective measure is already in the soil engineer's report. And so, they've done spot checks when they core drilled the soil to find out what the strata look like in the soil. And they have an idea basically what the site represents. Sometimes they're lucky and they hit a bad spot and they can point that out in their report. And they'll actually say in this location, column lines C and 12 is this bad soil and it needs to be corrected. But the point of the report is that they put it in there because there are going to be places where it's not been observed, and this is how to do it. So as long as there's been, how can I put this? As long as we know that they use the corrective measure that is in the soil engineer's report, then we can have confidence that it's okay. Generally speaking, what we've done, at least me and professionally, is that the soil engineer comes out and watches the install. It's part of the agreement that we had with the design team. So there's various ways of proving that it's acceptable, but the approved documents should have the corrective measure already. And as long as you see the crushed stone and they have verified, or maybe took a picture of it or something, who knows, that should be sufficient. Otherwise, it may require the engineer to come back out and do a check on it. So, and just to kind of sign off on it. Good question, though. Okay, so with regards to fire-resistant penetrations, it basically says that you can't conceal these things from view until inspected and approved. So when I was doing hospital projects, this was always an issue because oftentimes the contractor would jump ahead of the inspector, and that's when we would get a call. They'd put the bags and the caulking and all that stuff into the joints, and there was no way of verifying, how it was actually done and if it was done correctly. So in this particular one, it says that the protection of joints and penetrations and fire resistance rated assemblies shall not be concealed from view until inspected and approved. So that has to be clear to the contractor when they call in for the inspection. Someone should say that to them. Hey, make sure you haven't, plugged the thing all the way because we need to verify it. So we're looking to verify the joints, that is things in firewalls and barriers, any penetrations of pipes through those barriers and ductwork, electrical, communication lines, etc., prior to install, and check for materials that they're going to use on the site that they say they're going to put into those penetrations. This is how it's done per the approved documents. Just so you know, that information may not be in the actual drawings. It'll probably be in the specifications or to the details in the documents. There may be some UL directory information on the site as well, or part of the construction documents, as well as the manufacturer's installation instructions. Energy efficiency inspections. These shall include, but not be limited to, the following: envelopes, fenestration, duct systems, infiltration air barriers, such as caulking, sealing of openings and ductwork, HVAC, water heating equipment efficiency. So what are we checking when we're doing these inspections? Well, the approved documents are included in will include a COM check and a res check. And in there is basically the design approach that the designer used to get the energy efficiency for the building. So we're going to just do a walkthrough of the building envelope in accordance with the details that are in the documents. So I know that doesn't always happen on the residential side, just because they get away with it, to be honest. And we just oftentimes just wait for the test to be done. And if their changes are within range, then the inspector usually just signs off on it. But we do want to check things like the packaging or the front surface of insulation. Check the containers that these materials came in. Just verify that what they're using is per spec and is the right stuff. Painter's caulk isn't a good idea to use in foundation penetration opening caulking. It's going to deteriorate. Same thing with HVAC. There's certain types of caulk that you use to seal up junctures and ductwork. So check the packaging as you're walking through. Building service equipment inspections. They have to be installed in accordance with the approved plans and the equipment listings and the manufacturer's installation instructions. So the inspections include, but aren't limited to, systems and their associated components. So we're talking about mechanical, heating and ventilating systems, air conditioning systems, mechanical exhaust systems, plumbing systems, fire protection systems, and electrical systems. And what we're checking for, remember, I know that systems are complex, okay? But the approved documents must be relied upon in these verifications. Again, you may be looking at specifications and not just the drawings. So check the specifications for accuracy and sizing and the correct equipment, and ensure that it is consistent with the specifications for manufacturer listed by the design professional. So, there's going to be, I'm trying to think of a good example here. An HVAC system, the units themselves. There may be 3 or 4 different manufacturers that are listed in the specifications. And in the next section of that specification will indicate which type of system, meaning the listed labeled system, that can be used on that project. So you want to make sure that if first off, is Trane listed in the list? Did they provide some other manufacturer? If they provided some other manufacturer, then the gold standard that they had as the basis of their specification, they have these other alternates. If one of the alternates got picked, we want to make sure that the unit that was the alternate was the one that was still listed in the specification. If it's a different unit, it may not be sized correctly. So we want to check that kind of stuff. Okay, elevators. Again, this is all going to be done by the Division of Industrial Compliance, but we know that elevators just aren't the actual passenger carrying compartment. It's either traction or some other type of mode of operation. We need to look at what is the site-built stuff, and Division of Industrial Compliance will look at that, but they're really focused on the equipment and the installation of the cab and of the railway or anything else, anything that's specifically related to the installation or the actual equipment. The shaft and the machine room, those are things that you will check, okay, in terms of against the approved construction documents. And then there's going to be some coordination between you and DIC when it comes to reporting. So if everything checked out from DIC standpoint, they will have issued a violation notice or an approval. Okay. So this is what their form looks like, and this is what you'll need to look for on the job site. If there are things that they looked at and as they're doing their review of the machine control room or anything else that's in their list, they're going to let you know with this list. And they and you will be coordinating together with the contractor to ensure that their list is completed and your list is completed when it comes to anything that's an outstanding violation for elevators. For the most part, DIC is going to check everything anyway, and if they find something, they'll let you know that may be something that the building department will have to address. The main thing is the owner, their representative, has to correct all non-violation or non-compliance. Okay, boilers is the same situation. With boilers, we just need to be aware that the thing should not be operating when you show up. Okay, unless a certificate of operation has been issued. And that's going to be by the superintendent of industrial compliance, meaning the building official of the Division of Industrial Compliance at the Department of Commerce. So something to keep in mind there. I put this in here, it's in the code, but again, we're really relying on DIC to do these things, and we're just verifying that all of the records and equipment has been stamped and determined to be in compliance with DIC's review of this stuff and their inspections of it. But just be aware of that, especially when you get into large facilities such as hospitals that rely on water heat for a lot of the heating of the hospital. Other inspections. Okay, so everything I just gave you are the required inspections. But there may be other inspections that the building official wants to institute. He has the authority and the right to do that. So if there are certain systems or certain types of materials or things of that nature that he just feels that, hey, we should just be checking this anyway, I'm going to go ahead and create a required inspection for this. He can do that. And it would be a required inspection then in that jurisdiction, mind you. Okay. Other jurisdictions may choose to take a pass. So what do we check? All right, here's a good example of this. The RCO does not require roofing inspection, but it's an important system. If the roof fails, everything underneath it will eventually fail. So most jurisdictions that I know of have now instituted a roof inspection under the RCO. This is one of those other inspections created by the building official, and it's now a requirement that those inspections be conducted. And oftentimes they create a policy where they say that the inspection has to be done at a certain time. Everything has to be on except for the shingles, because we want to look for any flashings, any drip edges, where the ice and water shield is the proper underlayment in. Was there corrective measures to the decking? Because maybe it was an old roof and a lot of the decking was rotted. Was that corrected? Did it have the right size, et cetera, et cetera? I think you can get my point here. There's a lot to a roof, even though we don't give it a lot of importance. But in this case, where those jurisdictions have instituted it, the building department needs to follow through with it. And it's a little tricky because with roof inspections, it's like we got to get it done right before the next rain. So if you're going to have that policy to do roof inspections, you better have a policy that also frees up inspectors to do those inspections on an as-needed basis. Otherwise, owners will just choose to treat them as emergencies, and they'll have the roofs done, and then they'll just call in and ask for forgiveness later and say, hey, we had to get it done. It was an emergency. We had it fixed. I took a couple pictures. They go ahead and pay for the approval for it. And the inspector comes out and just kind of does the dirty word, a final inspection of the roof. Okay, again, another good reason for other inspections is where the magnitude of the construction is unusual. It's a huge building. It's super unique. There's tons of new products introduced into the design, things like that. A building official can institute other types of inspections to cover various scopes of work, types of materials, things like that. Again, whether the building official does it or not, he's going to still follow the same protocol. You're still going to inspect, you're going to keep the records, you're going to submit the reports, and you're going to do everything that you would normally do with other inspections. So something to just keep in mind is that even though when you guys are doing inspections and you're logging the stuff into your database, and there's probably a good chance that nobody's looking at it. Okay, if it passed, no one's looking at it. But if it didn't pass, your system should have something that puts a flag on that entry so that it can be followed up. especially if the building official has to make a determination or has to issue an adjudication order. So just be aware of that. Whatever type of system you're using for communicating information to the owner, to the building department, the building official, make sure that those communications are followed all the way through. All right. Full-time inspection may be required for certain things. Installation of fire protection systems could be installed rather by the fire protection designer. They are certified by the board, which kind of seems like putting the fox in the hen house because you designed it and then you inspect it. It doesn't seem unbiased to me. But since they understand the system and they understand the standards, oftentimes the fire protection system designer can inspect their own work. So just be aware of that. You still need to keep a log. They still need to communicate to you at the building department when things have passed, meaning that they're in compliance with the approved documents. Industrialized units. So Jay covers this program with the board. Basically, it's a mini building department within the Board of Building Standards for industrialized units only. Now remember, industrialized units are buildings that are constructed in a plant, and then they are shipped to a site and set on construction that you and in the building department review and approve and inspect. So when on-site work has been approved, if the industrialized unit is completed, it can be shipped and put onto this site. But that doesn't mean that they're done. The building inspector still has to go back out and check everything in terms of how it is set on the site built work. Okay. So there's some things that the inspector is looking for. They're going to look for whether or not the unit has been damaged, maybe as a result of the transportation or improper protection and due to weather. And if there is damage, then the building official needs to be notified, and they have to tell the owner basically to have the damage repaired. And then the inspection of the unit has to be determined, and the first thing you're looking for is the insignia or the sticker from the Board of Building Standards that says that this unit has been approved. It has to be on the unit. If it's not, then you have to tell the building official, and they have to do some research and check with the manufacturer to make sure that, hey, did you guys forget to put the insignia on, or do you not have one? So the building official can also call the Board of Building Standards, talk with Jay or Mike Regan, and verify if this is a fraudulent unit that's been delivered to the site. Another thing you'll check as the inspectors, just do a quick walkthrough. There should be a set of documents that are in the IU. Just walk it, make sure the floor plan matches the documents. Check the exterior elevations. We're just looking to see if they didn't do any last minute changes that somehow got by the IU division at the board. If there is anything that has happened like that, you need to notify us at the board so that they can get the unit reapproved from the manufacturer, or rather from you, but the manufacturer is resubmitting the documents for reapproval. Okay, so I guess the last thing is that when you find that the unit is contrary to the plans, report it to the building official. Excuse me, the building official will notify the board, and we will then take over to figure out how to get the corrective action. But the building official must wait for verification of board corrective measures before issuing the certificate of occupancy for the install. Okay, remember, once it's been delivered, the building official technically has jurisdiction over its installation and eventual C of O of the building. The The insignia that is on the unit is not a C of O. Okay, it is just the board's recognition that they have an approved design and that this building portion of that has been stamped or sealed with the board's insignia per the approval that was for just the manufactured unit. Okay. So I wanted to point that out as clarification because that's not always clear to folks. Okay, the posting of occupant and structural loads. These have to be verified. In chapter 16, it says that there has to be basically a durable sign that indicates occupant loads and structural loads of buildings. So you have a hospital, you have a medical records storage area on the 6th floor of the building, and it's going to have probably somewhere between 200 and 250 pounds per square foot on the floor. That's its dead load. In order for that to be in the building in that way, it had to have been approved and it had to have met all the structural requirements to support those loads. What we don't want to do is ever take the sign down and move that space to some other space in the hospital because the loading wouldn't be supported with the type of structure that was put in the other part of the hospital. So that's why we put these signs in. We want to restrict how many people could be in a room, such an assembly space. That's why we have a posting of the occupant loads for safe exiting under an emergency situation. And where there are structural loads that have to be abided to, if it exceeds 50 pounds per square foot, then it has to have a durable sign. Okay, so you're going to be checking through as you're doing the inspection, make sure those signs are in place prior to the C of O issued. It's not post C of O, it's before the C of O. So this has to be coordinated between you and the building official to make sure that these things have been picked up. All right, special inspections. Basically, this is going to be chapter 17. It's those specialty systems that have high risk mitigating importance and are very particular about how they are supposed to go together. So it's things like fire protection, as in like, things that protect walls, spray proof fire or spray fireproofing, things like that. All those things that are in chapter 17 require a special inspector. That special inspector can be the designer of record if they have good references and submit that information to the building official. The building official can approve the designer to be the special inspector. And in case you didn't know, in the RCO, it does require special inspection for reinforced hollow unit masonry walls, as in real walls, not basement walls. So anything that's above grade, that's greater than 8 feet in height, requires special inspection. So residential building officials, you need to be aware of that. If someone builds a block building and then puts a truss system on it, and it's going to turn it into a house, those types of walls have to undergo a special inspection and a report has to be issued back to you for verification. Okay, inspection agencies. These are agencies that are approved through us, the Board of Building Standards, as a conformity assessment body. So a special inspection agency, if they're employed, the building official needs to be aware of that. They need to check the board's website and make sure that they are on our list, and the building official approves them for use. And then the building official will receive reports from that agency for any time there's non-compliance. Okay, acceptance, performance, and operational testing. So there are systems out there in buildings that when they're fabricated, when they're installed, that the certified building inspector and building official need to be in the presence of the tests that are being done so as to verify that they are in compliance. Oftentimes, these tests are conducted based on either applicable codes in the building code or that are found as testing and performance and acceptance criteria found in the reference standard. So the building department needs to be notified by the contractor through advance notice so that you guys can be there to witness the testing, okay? So there is some coordination that has to occur between the contractor and the building department. There is, in section 1088, a contractor test completion certification that needs to be done for the plumbing systems. Maybe you didn't know that. If you are working with a Department of Health that's enforcing plumbing in your jurisdiction, they are required to receive these certifications, and they are required to notify the building department that these systems have been certified. The building official needs to know. This may not be being done in your jurisdiction because oftentimes health districts just kind of do it their way. But you as the building official and as the plan or the building inspectors need to be aware that these things need to be done. If you're enforcing plumbing in your building department, you should be making sure that these certifications are being given to you so that you know that the systems do not leak, that they are operational, that they are performing as they have been approved. Also, fire protection systems. It requires acceptance testing as well. Doesn't matter if it's new, altered, extended, or repaired. It is designed to be done every time there's something done to that system. So an acceptance test has to be done. And the whole purpose of it is to make sure there's no leaks and no defects in the system. So you'll be there to witness the test, and the acceptance testing is completed, and that there's been notification to you that the system is good to go. Apparatus, material, and labor for tests. The owner is responsible for paying for all this and to arrange it. So this is not something that you have to manage in that way. But when the testing is being done, you may not necessarily be required to witness these kind of tests that are being done. But the contractor is required to certify that these systems are per the reference standards, because there are forms in the back of these reference standards that they are supposed to fill out a copy of, and they should give it to the building department. So you may review these forms at your request. Reinspection and testing. All right, so I already hinted at this earlier in the first session, but where work or installation does not pass an initial test or inspection. So the inspector shall proceed as outlined in 1086. And when these systems are not passing performance tests or undergo some modifications of the systems to pass, an inspection is required. Okay. So I've been on jobs where the contractor repeatedly did not get the installation right on something. And it kept having to be fixed in the field and re-inspected. The re-inspection is necessary. We want to make sure that it is followed through and that the installation meets the approved construction documents. If it does not do that, then that information has to be communicated to the owner through the on-site inspection record and to the building official. Because the building official at some point may have to step in and issue an adjudication order, basically mandating that everything is in accordance with the approval. All right, remember, as I said, there's no such thing as a final inspection except for fire protection systems. It's the only place that it's listed. A purpose of inspections in general, okay, is to complete verification that all outstanding items that were in violation have been corrected. So you have your initial inspection, and if necessary, any re-inspections. If an inspection is compliant and passes, then it's just done. It just means that the system is completed. We don't need to have a final to say, well, we're just going to check one more time just to make sure, right? So keep in mind that successive inspections may be required to complete required inspections. Fire protection system final inspections. Okay, so I mentioned this already. It has to be coordinated also with the fire official. So we're not just going to send out a building inspector to look at this. It's going to be also witnessed by the fire official. Because remember, the building goes from our jurisdiction to the fire official's jurisdiction after the C of O. So it's always a good idea to work with your fire official to help you out with doing fire protection system review of documents. That helps the plan examiner, because the plan examiner still has to look at it anyway, and look at the notes between them and the fire official before approval is given for the system. But when we're looking at final inspections and certification of systems, the fire official has to be involved. This is their chance to basically walk the building that they're going to inherit and start enforcing. It's especially true, like I said, with sprinklers, because there's going to be an annual inspection of that. It's going to be an annual inspection of other fire protection systems. So we want the fire official involved. A quick note with regards to their involvement. We presume that everything has been built in accordance with the approved documents. There's really only one occasion where the fire official can cry foul if, as he walks the job with you, he says, there needs to be an additional exit sign put here. Now, you've already approved it, all right? So we want to be clear with the fire official that they can't just change it before the C of O is issued. If it was approved and is safe on the front side of the C of O, then the fire official. Now, the only caveat to this is where, say, furniture and things that weren't in the plans all of a sudden have changed the ability to see where egress facilities are. The fire official will make notes of it, and he can mention it to the owner, and the owner can proactively take measures to mitigate it. But what that means is that they have to come back in with documentation for reapproval. If the fire official decides to let it slide, he's going to cite it under the fire code after the C of O. And what that's going to do is, again, trigger the building code, and the submittal from the owner is going to have to come back to the, is going to go to the building department, and there's going to be a re-review and a reapproval based on what the fire official addressed post CO. So we're trying to keep the lane straight, everybody in their right lane. I think there is a little bit of flexibility in here before the C of O. If the building official is agreeing with the fire official based on the contents of the building now being loaded into the building, because the process is still going to be the same, either pre or after the C of O. It's got to go back to the building official for reapproval. But I want you to be aware of that, because sometimes fire can be pushy and demand things, and they have to understand that they're not the AHJ yet. They're just there to tag along to see the coordination of and the certification of fire protection systems. So hopefully that is helpful to you as you're reviewing those type of things. Okay, inspection completions. Again, when successive inspections have been done, meaning re-inspections, once those are done and they now comply with the approved documents, Building official reviews the findings, which should be typical, and shall issue the certificate of occupancy. So this is when all inspections have been done on the building. The C of O is ready to be issued. Okay. Let's see. One thing I want to note is that when buildings are under phase approvals, those successive inspections in the phases are actually just part of the bigger picture, right? So we got to be careful that if a building, let's see, how to put this? I hate to use the term, but a shell building, right? It's not going to be occupied right away. It's put up and it's ready for somebody to rent it. You're not going to get a C of O for the spaces. You may get a C of O for the whole building, but it's going to be general in nature. It's not until an approval request comes in for the space and how it's going to be used that a C of O will be issued for that space. Okay. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because oftentimes buildings can be built in phases, and depending on what has been done, there could be the temptation to go ahead and issue a C of O on the building once all those phases are completed, but the building may not be done yet. So we have to be careful about what we're communicating back to the building official and make sure the building official is aware of the circumstances. You can have a C of O or perhaps a certificate of completion for the whole building, but in terms of the individual slots, you will be waiting for additional information. One other thing, this has already been brought up, do not re-inspect work that has already been determined to be in compliance, unless the contractor has changed the work. Then you need to call the building official and figure out basically an approach on getting that inspected. Because if they've changed the work, that means they've changed the license to build, which means that the contractor, the designer, the owner need to resubmit documents to have that condition approved if it's approvable. If it can't be approved because it's still in violation, then of course the contractor has to correct it to make it match the approved documents, or the building official will issue an adjudication order so that the owner can appeal to maybe get a variance or something else. Okay, so just a reminder, a lot of you folks that are inspectors have come out of the trades. That's great because you know how this stuff generally is built, and we don't want to discourage that. But I want to caution you that when you're doing inspections, you are not performing a contractor's punch list. This is not about getting the work done. This is about verifying that what's been built is in compliance with the approval. Okay, so can a building be occupied and not be completely finished? Yes, it can. Think about it. Painting, finishes, trim on the floorboard, stuff like that. Can the building be occupied without those things? Yes. So we're not really trying to punch list the building. That's why we really don't have a final inspection. Because what's final? Well, to the building code, it's those systems, those materials, those things that basically represent risk that have to be done correctly so as not to be a risk to the occupants. Okay, the actual certificate of occupancy. That form, we've already talked about it. Please use our version of it, or you can amend it to make it look different on the piece of paper. But make sure that all those items in the C of O show up, okay? All right, I'm starting to run out of time. When things don't go differently than expected when you're doing your inspections, there are three conditions. The first one is work is contrary to the approved documents, right? We hope that when we go do an inspection, that every single time they're going to get it right. And it's just, that was easy, check. They're done, you can proceed with the work. But when it's contrary, and we know this already, that you have to tell them that it's not in compliance, and refer them to item 4. If they say we're not going to revise it in the field to match, and we're not going to revise the drawings to change the condition to make it approvable, then they are asking for an adjudication order. So that's condition 1, okay? How do we get them in compliance? At this point, if they say they're not going to do anything, the building official has to issue an order. The second condition is observation of violations not shown in the plans. That's that nobody's perfect approach, okay? So if the inspector looks at the work and looks at the construction documents and he sees that there is a code violation, okay, this is based on his knowledge of the code. He observed something that he knows is a code violation, but it was approved that way. He should at least document it and go back to the building official and tell the building official, hey, I walked the job. I noticed that this condition exists. It appears that the designer designed it this way, and it appears that we approved it this way. But this appears to be a code violation. The building official will then sit down with that information in the record with the plan examiner, make a determination. If it is a code violation that he believes should be communicated to the owner, then he sends it to the owner as a notice of recommended change. A notice of recommended change is an actual form. It looks a lot like the adjudication order, but the adjudication order is saying you have to do something based on this code section. And this one says, well, we approved it this way, but it is a code violation, and we're letting you know. But it is not a serious hazard, so you have to decide if you want to keep it or do you want to make it code compliant. So it's kind of a catch of a mistake. This is what our form looks like. And you'll notice when you read through, and I recommend that you download this from the board's website, actually read this form. It basically says, we observed a code violation. It was approved. However, it's still a code violation. We recommend that you abate this condition in order to be in compliance with the building code. Now the owner gets to make a decision. They can either agree with the building official and have it fixed, which could represent a lot of money, or they can live with it because no harm is done. No one's going to get hurt. So the bottom line is this: the owner gets to decide. We don't tell them what to do. The decision is theirs. Once they make it, it is final. You, the building official, and the building inspector, but especially the building official, needs to document this transaction in the C of O under stipulations, variances, conditions. Okay? Has to be done. Okay, unsafe conditions. This is serious hazards. Okay? When you find them, you have the inspector has a responsibility to communicate to the owner, especially if they're on site, and report these findings to the building official. The building official needs to issue an adjudication order to the owner to abate the condition. What's a serious hazard? A serious hazard is a hazard, a condition of considerable consequence to safety or health, which has been established through experience to be of certain or probable consequence. In other words, if someone interacts with this condition, they will either be injured or killed. Usually we're looking at things that fall under this category as electrical safety hazards and structural safety hazards. Those are usually the top two, okay? So we want to be sure that, inspector, if you notice something like this out on the job site, you should immediately tell everyone in the area of that condition to leave. It may even mean leaving the building, okay, for safety purposes. Now, it's up to them to decide what they're going to do, right? Honestly, I would leave because we don't want someone getting hurt or dying, okay? Here's an example of one of these. This actually happened in Columbus. Someone was probably high or drunk or something and ran a car into the side of all the supports of an apartment building, 2-story building. And it created a lot of damage to basically the walkway, second floor walkway, that went to 4 units of apartments. It did such damage to the landing at the top of the stair that no one could walk across it. Well, no one ever complained about it. The people that lived there just kind of dealt with it. You can see the rubble on the ground. The owner came and, with some posts from Home Depot and propped it up, which probably wasn't enough. And then put caution tape up. And apparently it had been like this for 4 months. So is this a serious hazard? If someone walked across broken slabs, the second floor, and it collapsed, would they get hurt? Yes. Could they die? Possibly. So the building department stepped in, declared this a serious hazard, caused the people on the second floor to vacate and the people below, because if there is a collapse and someone's coming out of the lower level door, they could be hurt or killed. So that's why this is important. It's important to understand what a serious hazard is and when to call them, okay? Always work with the building official. This is a legal process. They have to issue that. Okay, we're basically done. I just want to, in the last minute here, let you know that there are some resources out there. Half of them are out of date and half of them are under redevelopment. Since we have a brand new building code, we're beginning to work on the Chapter 1 commentary. I actually started looking at that just a few days ago, and we'll have to update the building department resource packet for the 2024 as well. Probably not a lot of changes will occur in it, but so I think you can still refer to the 2017 OBC commentary if you have a question. And if you do, you can always look at the 2024 and compare. But any changes or differences, we will fix that so that we can have a new Chapter 1 commentary out in the near future. Other really helpful things, which are out of date, unfortunately, and I checked ICC's website last night, actually, and I haven't seen any updates yet. But there's these things called ICC residential inspector guides. They are very helpful. They're exhaustive, but I like reading them because it helps me understand the things that I know that an inspector will be looking for potentially when they're walking the site for any given required inspection. I think it's really good reading in terms of just getting familiar with all the little things that you might need to check on a particular type of inspection. So I recommend you look at those. If you have access to them already in your building department, just grab one and read through it every once in a while on your lunch break. Same thing with the Energy Inspector's Guide. That one, again, it's going to change because the standards are no longer the 2013s, but it's still relevant information. So just keep that in mind. And if you have any questions with regards to, again, questions about technical requirements or building code enforcement, please give us a call. Let us know. We're here to help. With that, I'm done. Hope you have a great day and enjoy the rest of the Code Academy.
Hey, Rob?
Great presentation, Rob. I'm going to stop the recording now. Bruce, I know, has some questions from our participants that he'd like to bring up, but I think that we can end the recording. Really good job. And
Thank
great
you.
participation, everybody.